everyone, I'm Laura Gale Locke with your City 7 NewsNow update. It's been a couple of weeks since the April 14th tornado hit, and we brought in James Williams, who is a spokesperson for the American Red Cross, and also Randy Duncan, who is Sedgwick County's Emergency Management Director, and they're going to give us an update on the progress so far and where we're at now and what's still ahead. Thank you guys both for being here.
Thank you for the invite.
Well, why don't you start off by giving me an update on what's going on now?
Sure. I think probably the question that's on the top of most people's minds is where are we at in terms of declaration, and how can I as an individual get help, and what help's available from the government? So I'll be happy to start out there. We just found out recently that the Small Business Administration has granted us an SBA declaration. Now, many people will probably ask, why is it important that the Small Business Administration give us this declaration? Don't they deal just with businesses? And of course the answer is no, they don't. In fact, they deal with homeowners, they deal with renters, they deal with businesses of all sizes, and they deal with certain private nonprofit organizations. The effect of this declaration is that it will make available low interest, potentially long-term disaster assistance loans. Now, the details of each individual loan are set up and negotiated between the person making the application for the loan and the SBA, but individual interest rates can be as low as 1.8% on these disaster loans. Loans to private nonprofits can be as low as 3%, and loans to businesses as low as 4%. So there do seem to be some very low rates that would be an incentive to take advantage of this. Interestingly enough, they're going to be set up down in the Oaklawn area at 4900 South Clifton at the Carrollton School. They'll be operating Monday through Friday, 9 to 6, not only taking applications, but helping folks who might qualify fill them out as well.
Randy, is there something, if maybe somebody's watching this out there and they want to apply, what should they bring with them?
Well, the best thing to do is go online and look at the SBA.gov page and figure out what types of things are going to be required, and then try to bring those with you. I don't have a specific list with me today, but there will be information available online about that.
Maybe you could also talk a little bit about the difference between this declaration and the FEMA declaration.
Absolutely. That's a question we've been getting a lot, as you might imagine. The SBA declaration is sort of the lowest trigger level for what we call individual assistance as far as government disaster declarations are concerned. And we reach that level when we're able to document 25 or more homes or businesses with 40% or more uninsured loss. The next level that kicks in, the Federal Emergency Management Agency assistance programs, comes at 250 or more homes with 40% or more uninsured loss. So I've been getting the question quite frequently, do you think we're going to qualify for that? Our initial look at the data tells us that we've only got about 188 homes that fit in that destroyed and major damage category, which basically covers everything from 40% up to 100% destruction on the building. So at this point in time, I'm doubtful that we'll actually reach the trigger level for FEMA assistance to individuals.
Okay. And while we're on the topic of helping people, James, maybe you could talk a little bit about what the Red Cross has been doing.
You know, Laura Gale, we were on the scene right after the disaster. We worked with all of our community partners. We met the day before, and the outlook was severe. And I spoke with a coworker and I said, you know, we don't know where this tornado might hit, but we know we're going to be helping a community. We didn't realize it was going to be so close to our backyard. Immediately after the tornado hit, we set up a shelter in Derby, and right now we're working on getting those people, just as the county is, getting those people back on that road to recovery. So we want people to call Red Cross at 219-4052 to set up an appointment so that we can, you know, put them in contact with other resources or help them identify some resources that Red Cross might have to get them back on that road to recovery, be it placement in a new home or help replace some things. Our caseworkers can sit down and on a case-by-case basis really work with them and help them in the best way possible.
What are some of those other resources that you mentioned?
It just depends on the situation. You know, we saw a lot of homes damaged. We also saw a lot of homes destroyed. So it just depends on kind of what they lost. Red Cross is always looking to replace things that they had. You know, so if they didn't have a bunch of food in the refrigerator, we're not going to replace that. Or if they didn't have, you know, if you know, it just depends on the situation, and we're just going to evaluate on a case-by-case basis.
kind of have to go with the flow in this situation.
That's right.
Would you guys just give us a big picture again of, I know you mentioned was it 188 homes either had major damage or destroyed, but what about the others who were affected? What are the other numbers?
Oh, you bet. Interestingly enough, if you look at minor damage, which could range from 20 to 30% of the value of the building on the land, we had somewhere around 774 homes and 60 businesses impacted. The dollar amount in that area is staggering, $93,510,733. And then if we go down to our lowest area, which is affected by the disaster, which typically means a house or structure that's had up to 10% of its value damaged, we had 3,481 homes, 114 personal property homes, for a total of 3,595 houses that were impacted by this, and the estimated value of the damage to them is a little over $27.09 million. We had 165 businesses fall into that same category. The damage estimated to them is in the neighborhood of $6.46 million. So altogether, those are the elements of our estimate of approximately $146.314 million in damages to structures located here within Sedgwick County.
That's a staggering number.
It is.
Now, the governor also had a declaration as well. Would you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, I'd be happy to. The declaration process starts out at the local government first. What happens there is that activates our local emergency operations plan and puts in place some protection for government workers responding to help citizens who've been impacted or affected by the emergency or disaster. That's also kind of a heads up to our colleagues at the state level that there's a problem happening within our local jurisdiction. When we need potential help or assistance from the state, then the state considers doing a declaration of disaster emergency, and in fact that's what the governor elected to do in this particular case. What that does is it makes available certain state assets, and that includes not only equipment, it includes people, but it does not include money. The only disaster declaration that actually includes funding is if we get to a presidential declaration of major disaster, and of course there are basically two varieties of that: the individual assistance side, which we've already talked briefly about, and then there's the public assistance side. The public assistance side is actually designed to help units of local government, that is like counties, townships, cities, etc., recoup some of the costs that they incurred in terms of responding to the emergency or disaster.
Is that something we're looking into on that side?
Absolutely, and as a matter of fact, although we don't have any official word on this yet, we have every indication that we are moving toward a public assistance declaration. And it's good to talk about that because I don't want the public to be confused. There can be more than one declaration on this, and they mean different things. So, for example, a public assistance declaration does not mean that any additional assistance are going to be available to individuals from the Federal Emergency Management Agency.
Well, thank you for clearing that up.
You bet. And this is where partners like the American Red Cross, our other folks who are extremely active in the voluntary organizations, active in disaster group, the so-called VOAD, that's where these folks become key. Because in a situation like this where there are not federal resources available to help individual homeowners, renters, and others, our stakeholders, our partners, our private nonprofits become the lead for providing that assistance.
And James, maybe you could tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and so, you know, it's just devastating. These people, lots of these people have lost everything with little to no safety net to catch them from falling, and that's what Red Cross and Salvation Army and United Way, that's what we're all here to fill in those gaps. We all have very specific roles in a disaster, and especially in this long-term recovery. You know, right now is the time for the people who've been affected by this tornado to reach out and really get that help. It's amazing that when we go out and then we speak with these people, they say, you go help someone else, we're not that bad off. But in reality, that person has just lost everything in their home, and maybe it's that Midwestern value that they don't think that they need that help. But really, that's what Red Cross is here for. That's what we're all here for, is to pick them up and keep them strong through all this. And so they can just call Red Cross at 219-4052. They'll work with a caseworker, and we just evaluate what they have lost. And some of those things that we can work to replace include, you know, linens and clothing and food, and work to get them, in that new home. You know, we just spoke with a gentleman yesterday, and he was just so appreciative of what he'd done. He had given so much for his country already, and he said he would never want to go through another tornado again. And he had a hard time talking about it, but ironically enough, of all the things that we'll provide to them, what they remember most is that someone just stopped and talked to him. And my partner and I really felt like we did really valuable good yesterday by just talking to him. And while we didn't go and give him anything right then, we could just tell just by his demeanor how well he felt just after that short 30-minute conversation.
Well, I'm sure it helps to know that there's a caring community out there and people want to help. Any other stories that you've encountered that you want to share? We
were on the scene, and some gentleman was just picking through the rubble. You know, there was no discernible house left, and my boss Bev went out to him and just gave him a hug and talked to him. And he said, and it's just that spirit, you know, of everything that these people have gone through. Their spirits are incredibly high right now, and it's inspiring to see that. And I don't know what I would do if faced in that personal situation. I don't know how I would react. But you know, just our hearts go out to everybody who's gone through this, because it's really incredible to see how we've all responded.
How many volunteers have you had helping? You
know, it's remarkable. We've had nearly 100 volunteers and workers, and about 90 of those have been volunteers from all across the country. I was working with a guy from South Carolina, you know, and people think of what Kansas as the Wizard of Oz and all that.
Heard that before.
But he left with such an amazing idea of what Wichita is, and the community that we're involved in. Volunteers from across the country have flown in. You know, while it's me with this logo on my shirt, there are 650,000 volunteers that we can call on. We've sent volunteers out across the country as well. So now it's great to see in our community how Red Cross responds and brings in staff and equipment and supplies to a local community. We're really proud that we can be a part of this.
Absolutely. At this point, do you have any idea on how many people you've helped?
It's tough to say. You know, I do know that in the overnight shelter we've provided more than 100 overnight stays. We've distributed more than 12,000 meals and snacks. So we've been very active in this last week, and we're still out there. We're still helping. And as the disaster evolves and the recovery evolves, we're going to be there and involved with it as well.
And you know, I always think it's great to get the perspective on individual stories, and I agree with you. That's an extremely important service that you all as our private nonprofit partners perform, and that we to a certain extent perform. But I think those individual stories add up to a bigger story. And I think the big story here is one of hope in the community. And I got the very clear message. I had the opportunity to visit with somewhere in the neighborhood of 500 folks in the Oaklawn area at a town hall meeting the other night. And the message that was clearly communicated to me at that meeting was that community is going to come back. It's not going anywhere but up. And I think that is emblematic of all of the folks who live in the various jurisdictions here in Sedgwick County. We're fighters. We're going to be back. No two ways about it.
Bigger and better than ever.
Absolutely.
What else happened at the town hall meeting? Tell us about that.
Well, we had an opportunity to answer questions, and naturally, not everybody was happy to hear our answers, because some questions we just didn't have answers to. For example, the ones regarding, are we going to get FEMA assistance? And while we technically still don't have an official answer on that, it's looking more and more like the answer to that is most likely going to be no. So we have to help folks understand that the way to access assistance within the system is going to be through our partners in the voluntary organizations active in disaster, American Red Cross, Salvation Army, United Way, all of the other worthy organizations that I can't name on an individual basis because there are so many of them that are out there to help folks. And again, the whole purpose of that was try to answer questions, and that's one of the big services that we try to provide in the aftermath of an emergency or disaster. So people have lots of questions. They want to know, where's my life going to go? What's going to happen next? And to a great extent, I think that depends on the individual attitude and the attitude of the community. That's why it's so important and striking to me to make that observation that the Oaklawn community has made a clear statement that they're going to be back. I think this is the same statement we saw in the aftermath of the 99 tornado and the 91 tornado, which is why I think it's so emblematic of folks who live in our area.
It's great to see their spirit.
Absolutely.
Now I'm thinking that there's probably some folks out there who are wondering, is there anything I can still do to help? So if somebody out there wants to help, what would you tell them?
I think the lead thing that they need to do is call 211. We've had an excellent working relationship with the United Way of the Plains, and they have helped us in terms of folks who want to come in and volunteer. One of the lessons that we have learned from previous disasters is in order to get help to people who really need it, we need to coordinate things like donations and volunteers descending upon the scene. Otherwise, we end up with what we've sometimes referred to as the disaster after the disaster. And I think we have successfully negotiated that stretch of rapids in our disaster stream, if you will, and we want to keep folks oriented into calling 211 both if they have a need and if they have something that they want to volunteer.
That's good advice. Anything you'd like to add, James?
Just continue to visit our website, redcross.org. You know, all of our volunteers that have come in across the country all speak the same Red Cross language. So we offer training twice a year that would really encourage people to go out and be on the front lines of that disaster recovery to go and help. And then considering making a financial gift to disaster relief. That money that we raised and that we'll continue to accept, that all goes to help us now and for the next one. Because unfortunately there will be a next one. And that money allows us to be prepared, allows us to respond, and spend that money where we think and know the people who've been affected need it.
Really make a difference.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. You know, Randy, I know that you were in charge of, coordinating everything that night. Take me back through that and what that was like when the tornado hit.
Well, that's extremely interesting. I was in our Emergency Operations Center from about 3 o'clock that afternoon on. However, as James mentioned, we called our key partners together on Friday and had a briefing from our colleagues at the National Weather Service to understand that there was the very high potential for the occurrence of severe weather. So about mid-afternoon, I arrived at the EOC and we began monitoring the situation. There's always some level of uncertainty when it comes to weather. Otherwise, weather wouldn't be a prediction or a forecast. It would be a statement about what's going to happen tomorrow. So we always look and see what are the events that are going to control the formation and the movement of the severe weather. In this case, the movement of the severe weather was actually delayed coming into our area over the original forecast predictions. We thought we would have the storms that we got about 10:30 at night much earlier in the evening, probably before sunset. Now, it's interesting, when severe weather occurs, the most likely time for it to occur in our area is from 3 in the afternoon to 9 at night. So our tornado that occurred on the 14th was a little bit out of the ordinary because it occurred later than 9 p.m. Usually the atmospheric conditions are restabilizing to the point that the conditions won't support severe weather that late into the evening. But the atmosphere had a great disturbance. I'm tempted to go back to my Star Wars movie and say there was a disturbance in the force, so to speak. And we did have the occurrence of that severe weather. To sit there and watch that move in on radar is extremely nerve-wracking. To know and to see that signature, sometimes referred to as a hook on the radar, which is indicative of a tornado, and to know that it's moving into your jurisdiction and causing damage, that frankly causes a clench in my gut. And so I spent a great deal of the evening with that clench until we could find out exactly where the damage was occurring and so on. And frankly, we got a very good break. As this tornado was moving into Clearwater, it was a half-mile on the ground, a wedge-type tornado, which is how we describe the very large ones. And I'm going to quote my friend Chance Hayes, who's the warning coordination meteorologist at the National Weather Service office here in Wichita. in his highly technical and detailed explanation, he said, "We're not quite sure, but something happened." And that's highly, technical weather term. But the large circulation somehow recirculated or got rehashed into a smaller area of circulation, which is what did the actual damage inside Sedgwick County. And I think as bad as the damage is that we experienced, I think we can count ourselves lucky that we didn't face the primary rotational issue that was originally coming into our area. And of course, I'm always thankful nobody was killed in this storm and a relatively small number of people were injured. Our most sincere sympathy goes out to everybody who was impacted by the storm. I can't imagine what that would be like, but I do know that I have been in this business for 26 years and I've seen a number of different tornadoes and other disasters, and I know that it impacts people, and that's one of the reasons why I'm in this business. We want to try to help people return to normal, and that's why this whole thing is a team between government and the private nonprofits. The team exists with the express purpose to try to get people back to normal after they've been impacted by an emergency or a disaster.
Well, that's right. We can accomplish a lot more together. So what's going on with the cleanup now?
Well, it's interesting. We have had all sorts of mutual aid assistance. We've had local townships from within Sedgwick County. We've had the cities of Derby and Hayesville. We've had Sedgwick County Public Works and the City of Wichita Public Works. And most recently, we've had additional assistance from the Kansas Turnpike Authority to help in hauling out debris from the impacted area. Just to give you a rough at-a-glance idea, Monday there were 202 dump truck loads of debris transported to the burn pile. Now this is clean tree limbs and other stuff, and this doesn't count the household waste that was moved out. So we're making advances. Unfortunately, there's a lot of debris to get out of there, so we don't yet have a good idea of what percentage of the debris we've removed. And sometimes what happens in these debris removal operations, our friends in Public Works tell us that we sometimes have a little miracle that occurs. We go down a street and we remove the debris, and then the next day we go back and there's more debris on the street. It just kind of appears magically. So we think, of course, what happens is that sometimes there's tree limbs and other debris in the backyard that people haven't had time to get out to the front, to the curb line, so that it can be removed. But we're hopeful that we can make a major dent in this by the time this week is out, and we want to get that debris out of there so we can dispose of the clean tree limbs in the burn pit and get the household waste hauled off to the transfer station and get the household hazardous waste to the household hazardous waste disposal, so that we're successful in getting us started down that road toward recovery.
Tell us a little bit more about what's on the horizon as you guys continue through this process.
Well, I'm hopeful what will happen, and we're already seeing this to a certain extent. Our level of activity will actually begin to decrease a little bit. For example, we have had a daily management meeting in the Oaklawn area to discuss debris removal and other issues. At our meeting Monday, we made the decision to decrease the frequency of that meeting from daily to every other day. So that's a sign, in my opinion, that we're beginning to get our hands around the situation, and eventually we'll see that meeting frequency stop at some point. I'm hopeful that'll be within the next couple of weeks.
You're moving in the right direction.
We think we are.
James, what about you?
You know, Red Cross operates in phases, and so right after the tornado hit, we brought in lots and lots of volunteers when it was safe to come in to do our damage assessment. So that way, what we're doing now, client casework, we could say, oh, I see that you lived at 1900 East Douglas. I see that your home was totally destroyed, and here's how we can help. So we had teams and lots of teams out there in the Oaklawn community evaluating the damage and making that map of tracking about who lost what. And then right now we have our client caseworkers in, and working with them now. So different specialties of volunteers will scale up and down depending on what phase of the disaster we're in. But similar to what was just said, we're also sending some people home now. We've gone a week just over a week into this thing. And a big function of what we've done is done. We're done with the shelter. We've closed our shelter. We're glad that we've gotten those people more permanent homes. And now we're just working on that client casework. And as that need, and we'll continue to evaluate that need as the situation evolves. And eventually we'll send home our volunteers from across the country. But the local American Red Cross is still going to be here, and we're still going to be helping. And so we'll still have client caseworkers available should someone finally decide that they do need that help.
Mm-hmm. Before we go, is there anything else you guys really want to reinforce to people or make sure they know?
Yeah, I think the main message we want to get out is call 211, either if you have a need or if you have something that you want to donate, whether it's yourself or a service. And be aware that if and when additional assistances become available, we will work very closely with our partners in the media to get the information out there and take advantage of if you were affected by the tornado and have needs, take advantage of what's out there to help you. Our voluntary organizations, Active in Disaster, and the SBA declaration, potential for low-interest long-term loans. Don't let those pass you by if you were affected and you need help.
That's good advice, James.
I think when we look back on this, this is going to be a really excellent case study on people who knew about this storm coming. And so anytime there's severe weather, and we're still in severe weather season, it's important to have a kit, have a disaster preparedness kit, make a plan, know what you're going to do should that disaster happen, and then be informed. And I think that's a big reason of why we saw no fatalities and such few significant injuries, is because people took this very seriously. And we need to take severe weather seriously because we're no strangers to it, and we know what's going to happen again.
That's right. Get those kits ready.
That's right.
Well, thank you both for being here and for sharing this helpful information with our viewers. We sure appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching the City 7 News Now Update.